Welcome to the Taste of the World webinar with the stories of Paraguay and Colombia, the Mennonite stories of Paraguay and Colombia. My name is Sandra Reimer, and I work with TourMagination on their communication. Today we have with us one of our most popular tour leaders. He and his wife, this is Jack Suderman, and he and his wife Irene have led our tours to Cuba, and people have just loved those. Now, we have a new tour that they're going to be leading to Paraguay and Colombia this fall. And just a little more about Jack. He and Irene lived with their family for 5 years in Colombia, and they also lived in Bolivia before that. They speak Spanish fluently. They also understand the customs and culture of Colombia and its neighboring Paraguay. Today, we are going to have a discussion with Jack. I'm going to do an interview with him about some of the reasons you might want to come on this really fantastic tour. And he's also going to walk us through the itinerary so you can see what to expect on this tour. And Jack, why don't you take it away and tell us what you think is so great about this tour to Paraguay and Colombia.
Well, thank you, Sandra. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be able to share a little bit about what I consider to be a great opportunity for a South American visit. Later on, or in a minute, you'll see the map, and you'll notice that Colombia is right at the north end of South America, with coasts on the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean, and Paraguay is closer to the south end. It's more landlocked. But this geographical, and there's significant distance between the two, but this geographical separation or contrast is not merely the only contrast that one will find when one looks at the Mennonite story in South America. Basically, in South America, the Mennonite story is threefold. One is the Germanic immigration Mennonites that tended to settle in colonies, especially in Paraguay and Uruguay and Brazil, but also in Central America and Belize and Mexico, and of course. And so that is one face of the Mennonite reality in Latin America. Another face is the face of the indigenous Mennonite communities, which in a sense are a product of the interface or the connection between the Germanic Mennonites and the context in which they found themselves. So and we'll see this especially in Paraguay. We're going to visit one of these indigenous communities and how they connect, or how they have been connected with the colony Chaco Mennonites, which are Germanic. It's quite a story. It's a very interesting story. It's actually a controversial story, and the jury is still out in terms of, there are some sociologists and anthropologists that interpret this interface between the Germanic and the indigenous Mennonites or cultures as something that has proven to be extremely positive. And there are others that would say that it has been less so. And so it's a very interesting story, which we'll be able to connect with. But a third face of the Mennonites in Latin America is the face of the non-Germanic and non-indigenous, what is often called the Hispanic church, the face of that. And this is another significant contrast. Paraguay does have a Hispanic church alongside the Germanic and alongside the indigenous churches, which is also part of the story there. Colombia, however, is one of the few Latin American countries where there has never been a Germanic presence of Mennonites. And so this whole story of colonies and Germans and thing that is foreign to Colombia, that is simply not there. And so it's quite a contrast. So the fact that TourMagination is taking this opportunity to guide you or to give you an exposure to these three faces of Mennonites in Latin America, the Germanic, the Indigenous, and the Hispanic churches, is quite a significant opportunity, one that's worth taking, and it's actually quite exciting because the contrasts are significant, but there's much learning that can take place in looking at that.
Jack, could you comment on maybe some of the ways that the Germanic, Indigenous, and Hispanic Mennonite churches and people are influencing their societies?
Well, that's a good question. Each one, of course, is and has done this in their own way. In Colombia, perhaps the most dramatic example of how the Mennonite Church in Colombia has become a leader in many ways in terms of the revolutionary reality that Colombia has lived for the last 60 years. And in the last 20 years, or almost 30 years now, the Mennonite Church has become extremely engaged in trying to be a voice and a witness to find a way of ending that violence. And they have been amazingly successful. It's a very small group, but it is large. It is big beyond its numbers in terms of its impact that it's had on the Colombian society. For example, the change in the Constitution itself, the National Constitution in 1992, had significant Mennonite input and significant Mennonite impact in terms of conscientious objection, in terms of talking about the war and the military participation, which was a new thing for Colombia. It had not happened before. And the peace process. The Mennonites have several organizations, Justa Paz, which is an organization of just peace, which is a nonviolence organization. And they kind of have their own Mennonite Central Committee, their own MCC. And they've been extremely involved in the politics, the culture, the society, in many, many ways. In fact, they have become kind of a leader in all of Latin America in terms of Mennonite Church engaging its context.
Now, I understand that you and your family were there from 1989 to 1994 to some really key years in getting some of that peace process started. Could you maybe share a story of something that happened or something that illustrates the impact Mennonites have had there in Colombia?
Yes, the years we were there were very difficult. They were right at the heart of the war of the Colombian government against the drug cartels. And the violence was at a peak, and they were very difficult years. The Colombian Mennonite Church, exactly in that time, in 1990, in fact, started what has become quite a famous organization. It's called Justa Paz, which is a Spanish way of saying just peace. And this organization has generated almost legendary ministry in terms of nonviolence, peace, and prophetic ministry in Colombia. And we were there. We were part of that. Wow. Sowing the seeds and helping to make them grow. And it's exciting to see what has happened there. On the other hand, I should say that the Paraguayan Mennonites have also been active, politically and otherwise, but in a very different way. For example, one of the Minister of Finance and Economy was a Mennonite for a number of years, and we may in fact get to meet him. I'm not sure, but I hope so. And they have been their impact has been felt especially in the economy of the country, where they are the largest cheese producers. I think they produce more than 80% of the cheese in Paraguay. They are known for their thriftiness, their hard work, the economy that they've generated in the country, the help that they've given, for example, the leprosy hospital, and many other ways in which they've been very actively involved.
That's great.
And so I don't know if we can go to the slides.
Sure.
Take a quick look at the itinerary, what is being planned. I think it's an itinerary in contrast. Here you see the map I was referring to. Colombia at the north end, Paraguay much further south, and the contrast is a very exciting one, and both contexts have significant things to teach us. So just look at the itinerary. We meet in Asunción. We will be hosted and staying at the Mennonite guest house there, which is a very lovely place. On the second day or the first day after we arrive, we will be going to one of the colonies, the Germanic colonies, the Sommerfeld Colonies, and see the development there, especially the work of Albert Hildebrandt and his wife Mary, and what they have been able to contribute, not only in terms of the economy, in terms of the large flour mill factory that they have generated, but also that they are very instrumental in the building and the sustaining of Kilometer 81, which is a very famous and well-known hospital for lepers and leprosy, which has gained reputation right across Latin America. Also, they have worked at schools and providing education for children. So we'll be spending some time at their colony, which is the Sommerfeld Colony. We'll spend some time at the hospital. We'll lunch there, and we'll come back to Asunción, which is the capital city of Paraguay. The Mennonite Center where we're staying is an excellent opportunity to meet face-to-face many of the Mennonites that come into the city for various reasons. So it's an excellent location. There is part of the hospital that you see there. And then we will, on the fourth day, we will move on to the Chaco. It's a significant couple of hours of a drive on a bus to north from Asunción to the Chaco, where the traditional Germanic immigration landed, and they opened this area of Paraguay. It was basically a desert, and they have worked hard to make it bloom. And it's a lovely place with a lot of...
Jack, can I just interrupt for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say where these Germanic Mennonites came from that came to some of these colonies in Paraguay?
Yes, they came from Europe. This is part of the 1920s immigration out of Europe. Some of them went to Uruguay, some to Brazil, some to Mexico, and some went to Paraguay. They were aided in this process by Mennonite Central Committee and by the North American Mennonite churches. So in the colonies, we'll again in the Chaco we'll visit some of the colonies. The Neuland Mennonite colony will be our headquarters, our center, and see some of the development, industrial and other development that has taken place there. The milk plant, the museum that they have, which is very interesting, and also then on the sixth day we will go to the Yalvi Sangha, which is a community of Indigenous Mennonites. This is part of what I was talking about before. The interface between the Germanic and the Indigenous people has resulted in significantly strong and large Indigenous Mennonite church. Actually, there's three denominations that are Indigenous. And so we will be going to one of those and we'll have the opportunity to interface and to see them and converse with them and see a presentation that they make and eat with them, which is a very significant opportunity. And then on Sunday morning, we will. There's some pictures there of the indigenous communities that we'll be visiting. And then on Sunday morning, we'll be attending a local church in Philadelphia, one of the main city in the Chaco, and then return to Asunción before we leave for Bogota in the morning. So that's a very simple, quick overview of the itinerary of the Paraguayan part of the experience. And then we fly to Bogota, Colombia. And I've already indicated we lived there for 5 years. It's a story that's worth knowing and understanding. It's a very, very different context, a very different story than Paraguay. You can see there Colombia is the only Latin American country or South American country that has coasts on both sides, on the Caribbean and on the Pacific. And this has had advantages and challenges for them. So we'll get there on Monday, hopefully mid-afternoon or so. We'll have time to rest and have some supper. And then on Tuesday will be a major day of orientation to the Mennonite realities in Colombia. The Mennonites have many very significant institutional realities. They have Justa Paz, which I already mentioned, a Christian Center for Justice, Peace, and Nonviolent Action. And they have Coldes, which is kind of their version of Mennonite Central Committee. Mennonite Central Committee is there as well, and we will be interacting with them. And the Mennonite World Conference headquarters is now also in Bogota, Colombia, because of the General Secretary of Mennonite World Conference, Cesar Garcia, has his home there. And so we'll be spending a significant time with him to get some orientation to the world reality of Mennonites from his perspective. And we'll be having lunch or supper with members of a local church, which will give us a chance to interact with the folks there. The next day, we will take a trip throughout the city of Bogota. The city of Bogota is very large. It's 11 or 12 million people. And so it's a very large, congested city. And so we'll try to make our way around on a bus and see some of the Mennonite congregations and the Palace of Justice and many other sites that are there in Bogota, just to have a good sense of the context.
Just have a question for you, Jack.
Yeah.
What's the overall population of Colombia?
The population of Colombia is close to 50 million. I believe it's somewhere almost 49 million.
Yeah.
So it's a significantly high number for a small but very beautiful country. I think you will be impressed with the beauty of Colombia. There's very few places that are more beautiful than Colombia, but it is densely populated. So after Tuesday, then on Wednesday, we will drive out of the city and get to see some of the country. Bogota, by the way, is on a plateau of 8,000 feet high. And so once you drop off the plateau on the edges, then you get into the very beautiful areas of rainforests and coffee and many other mountains. It's mountainous, it's in the Andes Mountains. And so we will be taking a tour or a short trip, about a 2-hour trip outside of Bogota to the historical birthplace of the Mennonite Church in Colombia, which is a little town by the name of Cachipai. That's where the whole thing started. And we'll see a coffee farm, a Mennonite coffee farm, and we'll also visit a neighboring town, which is called La Mesa, where the Mennonites have a very successful school. This school is well known in the entire country. It's won many awards from government. and we'll be able to visit that and get some sense of that. The next day, we will again drive out of Bogota, but stay on the plateau and not go as far to a quaint little village or little town called Zipaquirá. One of the attractions there is a cathedral that is made entirely of salt. You walk into this mountain, and it's a mountain of salt, and they have carved out this enormous cathedral, which is very beautiful. And we'll have the opportunity to browse around in the local markets and see what small town Colombia is like. And it's a very pleasant day, kind of a tourist day. And then on the Saturday, the last day, we'll go up to the lookout. It's called Monserrate, and take a look there from on top what Bogota looks like. It's quite an impressive place. And we are hoping that in the afternoon on Saturday, we'll be able to have an encounter with some of the actors of the revolution that has gone on there for so many decades. Recently, you may know that there was a peace accord that was signed between the Colombian government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces, which was the biggest revolutionary group in Colombia. They have given up their weapons, and it's a very significant development, finally, in the peace process, which, by the way, Mennonites were much involved with. And this doesn't mean that all issues have stopped. It takes a long time to wind down a 60-year war, but it's a very significant initiative. And finally, they have managed at least to get this down on paper. And the elections that are going on right now, the Revolutionary Armed Forces, for the first time, are taking a democratic route and are running candidates at the local and regional levels, hoping to be a political impact or influence through the electoral process. So it's a time of transition and very, very significant change in Colombia, and it'll be very interesting to learn more about this.
Wow.
And then we're still not 100% sure about the time of our flight on Sunday. We may be able to attend the local church for worship service yet on Sunday before we depart for the airport, and then come home. So that's kind of an overview of the Colombia itinerary.
That's great, Jack. It looks like... Yeah, go ahead. It looks like this tour has a really good balance of encounters where people are going to meet locals. They're going to really see up close the three stories you talked about: the Indigenous Mennonite story, the Germanic Mennonite story, and the Hispanic Mennonite story. Exactly. And it sounds like there's a good balance of learning, of seeing the sites, and also a little bit of shopping, seeing the tourist sites as well.
Yes.
Yeah, sounds really great.
I think it is. It's a really unique opportunity. I don't think, well, you can speak for TourMagination. I don't think you've done something like this before.
No.
It's a significant opportunity. It's rare, and I would certainly encourage people to take advantage of it.
That's great. Well, before we sign off, I thought we could just maybe address a few questions. I know sometimes people might be a little bit concerned about safety. When a country is different, it's foreign, we kind of have images in our mind of, Colombia. The first thing you hear about is drug cartels and conflict. Can you tell us maybe about why you feel like it is safe to travel to Colombia and also important?
Good question. It is safe to travel to Colombia. the wars and the conflicts are not necessarily something that you will see up front, face to face, but conflict is still there, especially in the rural areas more than in the urban areas. Conflict is there, and as I indicated, just because 15,000 guerrilla forces have laid down their weapons and have stopped any kind of initiatives for violence. The fact is that this war lasted 60 years, and it creates a certain kind of vacuum now in the society, which other groups, more criminal groups, are trying to fill. And so, obviously, it's still not everything is smooth in Colombia, but we don't have to worry about safety issues. Although in the streets of Bogota, I mean, yeah, prudence is always necessary,
Right.
and we have to be aware of that. But nothing dramatically unusual for persons who may have traveled to other parts of Latin America.
Okay. And I think it's helpful that people can feel safe knowing that you and Irene understand the culture, and you know lots of people on the ground who are right there who can advise you about what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So
the other part of your question, Sandra, was why is it important? I think the Colombian Mennonite Church is a very tiny church. Mm-hmm. It has strength way beyond its numbers. It has influence and power, if you wish, shaping power way beyond its numbers. And yet they often feel very alone, and they feel isolated, and they wonder whether people care about what they're doing. They're taking significant and have taken very significant risks for peace in that difficult situation. And so any kind of symbolic or other gesture of solidarity and support and accompaniment is extremely important for these folks. It's something that we can offer, which is very highly appreciated.
That's great.
And so I'm happy that we'll be able to do this.
That's great. It sounds like that North American Mennonites have a lot to learn by visiting these countries, that we can share our perspective and, like you said, come in solidarity, say, hey, we're brothers and sisters, we're here standing with you. But also that as we listen to maybe some of the stands they've taken, some of the risks they've taken, and the ways they have dared to be involved in their societies, that we could really learn from that.
There's no doubt about that. We have much to learn from these precious, generous, and very transparent folks who try to live their understanding of the gospel in the way that we can only imagine sometimes. So,
wow. Jack, I just really want to thank you for your perspective and sharing with us some of what people might see on this tour. Do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Not other than to encourage folks to consider this. It's my wife and I, Irene and I, of course, love Latin America. Our family grew up there, and our boys love it. And there's so much in the culture that is rich, and the music, and the food, and the people. And the culture itself is so warm and embracing and hospitable, both in Paraguay and in Colombia, that it's just an opportunity that we'd love to share with folks. And I think they would think that they would wonder why they haven't experienced this before, because it's well worth doing.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your expertise. We hope that people will take advantage of this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you.
All right.